What's up, Neon Nation? Welcome back to the channel for another Cyberpunk 2077 and Cyberpunk lore video. Today we're talking about Braindance, what it is, the history of Braindance, creating a Braindance, how to view Braindances, what it's used for, and its dangers. We do have a quick lore episode on Braindance if you want a 3-minute briefing, but this video will go much more in depth, and to be honest, it's more worth your time to watch this one if you need to know everything about the universe of Cyberpunk. The best way to explain a Braindance is that it's your own personal immersive virtual reality experience. In Night City, poverty, class disparity, slums and homelessness, and an overall poor quality of life leads to the inescapable humdrum of existence. Despite all of this, there still is the concept of showbiz and the glitz and glamour of luxurious lifestyles, all giving that impression that if you chase the American dream hard enough, you'll be an A-list celebrity living the high life. Now, with the leaps in neural technology of 2077, this can be easily experienced by even the poorest slum dweller via a Braindance. Braindances are similar to a netrunner's interface as it allows someone to experience a completely different realm or reality via a neural transmission. Unlike a netrunner though, the experiences are not created from the user's brain, but instead pre-recorded thoughts, memories, and physical sensations of whoever recorded the Braindance. Braindance was originally developed as a program for convicted criminals and later as a military simulator for troops to practice in before they got deployed. However, Braindance quickly became the most popular form of pure entertainment in Night City. Companies such as Digital Media Systems, Braindance Inc, and Home Braindance Organization have employed people purely to go out and record some of the craziest and most lavish situations that most people can only dream of. As the employees and recordees engage in these dangerous situations, a technician records the experience and later edits the recording for commercial use and viewings. Once the Braindance chips have been compiled and edited, they're distributed for mass production to the public. The public has 3 ways they can access and view Braindances. First, we have arcades. These are multiple level rooms of private booths where people can experience the latest Braindances distributed by that particular arcade. The second are in bars, which have a couple black boxes to view Braindances in and a subscription to a service that distributes Braindance recordings. The third way is to buy your own black box and rent chips from arcades or subscribe to BD services yourself. In the gameplay demo for Cyberpunk 2077, it also looks like we can order Braindance chips from these Night City vending machines. Braindance, otherwise known as the alternative reality process, was invented by Yuriko Sujimoto, a graduate of the University of California at Santa Cruz in 2007. Using the Moss equation, which is the basis for neural responses, and a netrunner interface, Sujimoto managed to record all of her thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations into a standard information chip. Plugging the chip back into the netrunner interface or cyber modem, she was able to experience all the thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations that she had recorded. Knowing this and trying to apply it to a real-world problem, Sujimoto deduced that it was best used as a method to reform and recondition hardened criminals and their mental states. At the time, many believed that once you committed such crimes, you gave up your rights and you were essentially a human guinea pig if needed. Criminal reconditioning was approved by the Supreme Court within this time period for certain antisocial crimes. Now, before this, criminal reconditioning was largely ineffective, but with Sujimoto's new discovery, this psychological reconditioning could be done cheaply and effectively and relieved a lot of stress that prisons felt with overcrowding and unsustainable infrastructure compared to the amount of prisoners. Now, in order to create an aversion to crimes in the minds of these criminals, these Braindances had to be recorded in such a way where if a criminal repeatedly played it in their minds, they would start to loathe all crime in general and lull themselves back into a mentality that is safe for the streets. In order to do this, however, they had to make new recordings of criminals actually committing these crimes and recording their sensory and neural processes. This was a daunting task for Sujimoto and Norman Lazimer, who joined Sujimoto as a psychologist to monitor their progress. Sujimoto eventually got the Californian State Senate to fund the project and offered reduced sentences to volunteers who would reenact these crimes with small changes made to them that when viewed would turn any potential criminal off that specific crime. This got the attention of Militech, who stepped in and helped with funding in exchange for a license to market Braindance machines as a military simulator. Despite this, the program still lacked volunteers, but on March 7, 2009, Sujimoto and crew would get a big break. On this date, Gerald McElroy, a convicted mass murderer, was due to be executed by the state. Before he was, though, he made one final and unusual request. If Militech would compensate his family with a sum of money, McElroy would allow himself to be killed while recreating one of the scripted crimes. McElroy allowed his death to be recorded, and this was a pivotal turning point. 8 more volunteers made similar deals within the year with Militech, and their deaths were recorded as well. This initial pool of braindances were taken to trial at San Quentin Correctional Facility, where the first inmate, Gerald Weisenheimer, spent 9 hours a day for 1 week, living exclusively in these introductory braindances. This initial trial was successful as Weisenheimer, who was a convicted robber, swore to never rob anyone else again and mentioned he would never touch another person's money as long as he lives. This first success led to the state of California to further fund the program, and with increased funding in 2009 and a governmental contract to produce more machines and tapes, Lazimer and Sujimoto formed Braindance Inc. This also led to Braindance to be pivotal in treating and reforming different kinds of criminals, namely cyberpsychos, who suffer from cyberpsychosis, a prevalent mental disease in Night City you can induce if you augment yourself with too much cyberware. Now, creating a braindance for mass consumption is a fairly straightforward process. All you need is one braindancer, a video technician, and a braindance technician who controls the neural feeds. A solo may also be required to get the braindancer out of a dicey situation. Recording a braindance can be done in one of 2 ways, either via a scripted sequence or by real-life events. The more scripted ones tend to be more rigid and don't stimulate the same emotions within the braindancer as real-life events, and the quality of the recordings tends to suffer because of it. Unscripted ones are compiled with the braindancer on the fly and are more free-flowing. They have an authenticity to them that the viewer can really appreciate. A braindancer typically compiles 5 hours of footage and hands it off to an editor who curates the footage down to around an hour. Editing consists of the editor going through the braindance with the sensory elements turned off in an attempt to tailor each specific interaction and experience. Say in a braindance you got shot. The editor could theoretically go through and make that precise moment where you got shot feel like a tickle or a warming sensation, and is up to the creativity of the editor. Once edited, it's submitted for approval to the braindancer and a corporate marketing team. After it's been approved, the Braindance chip is distributed for testing, where it's viewed and commented upon. If the chip is well received, it enters a stage of mass production and starts entering stores. There are some dangers associated with Braindance, however. Illegal duplication and distribution of Braindance chips comes with a multitude of risks. Homemade Braindance chips do not undergo the same scrutiny and safety standards as mass-marketed ones, and illegally produced recordings sometimes contain the death of the braindancer. The bodily shock of dying in recorded form can many times shock the viewer and can stop their heart. Another risk involved in Braindance is subliminal suggestion. When Braindance first became available to the public, rumors were that people's personalities were being altered and even overwritten by more intense braindances. It was soon after revealed that some black market Braindance chips had leash programs strong enough to overwrite a person's personality completely and wipe their sense of self. Braindances by nature are also very addictive and can lead to people letting their lives rot away whilst they get caught up in the glitz, glam, and action of these heavily induced sensory experiences. Now, Braindance is not a new Cyberpunk 2077 concept, and for that I have to thank subscriber Kings County Lighthouse for this very elaborate and well-written email about some of the origins of the concept. He mentions William Gibson's Fragments of a Hologram Rose as a cyberpunk short story, which in essence speaks on an ASP deck, which is the equivalent to Cyberpunk's concept of Braindance. I suggest you guys look that up. It's free to read if you just Google it, so check that out, and again, thanks to Kings County for that tidbit of information. Thanks for watching, guys, and remember, for everything and anything Cyberpunk 2077, to subscribe to the Neon Arcade.